Welcome to Uncle Al's Bookshelf, the channel where we help you discover the world's greatest stories in just a few minutes. Whether you're a busy book lover who doesn't have time for long reads, or you simply want to explore the highlights of classic literature, this is the place for you. I'm your host, Uncle Al, and in each video, I'll take you on a journey through the most beloved books of all time, giving you a quick overview of their plots, characters, themes, and literary styles. So sit back, relax, and get ready to join me on a trip through the pages of history's most enduring works. In today's video, we are going to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. The novel has been published in 1960. It is a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel and a classic of modern American literature. The story is set in the fictional town of Maycomb, Alabama, during the 1930s, and follows the experiences of a young girl named Scout Finch as she grows up and learns about the racial tensions and injustices of her community. The novel explores themes of racism, prejudice, and the loss of innocence. It is widely regarded as a masterpiece of American literature and is studied in schools and universities around the world. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee is divided into two parts. Part 1 introduces the main characters and sets the stage for the novel's central conflict. The protagonist and narrator of the story, Scout Finch, tells of her childhood in Maycomb, Alabama, and the events that lead up to the trial of Tom Robinson, a black man accused of raping a white woman. Along the way, Scout and her brother Jem learn about the racial and class divisions that exist in their town, as well as the prejudices that many of their fellow citizens hold. Part 2 focuses on the trial of Tom Robinson and its aftermath. Scout and Jem's father, Atticus Finch, is the defense attorney for Tom Robinson, and the trial highlights the deep-seated racism and injustice of the town. Despite Atticus's best efforts, Tom is found guilty, and the verdict has a profound impact on Scout and Jem. The novel concludes with a dramatic confrontation that forces Scout to re-examine her own beliefs and assumptions about the world around her. Part 1 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee has 11 chapters. These chapters introduce the main characters and the setting of the story, as well as establish the central conflict of the novel. Chapter 1 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee sets the stage for the novel by introducing the narrator, Scout Finch, and her family, as well as the town of Maycomb, Alabama in the 1930s. The chapter begins with Scout providing a brief description of her family and her hometown, stating that her father is a lawyer, her brother Jem is 4 years older than her, and that her mother passed away when she was young. Scout also describes Maycomb as a small town where everyone knows everyone else's business. The chapter then introduces Scout's friend Dill, who visits Maycomb every summer to stay with his aunt. Dill becomes fascinated with the idea of seeing Boo Radley, a reclusive neighbor who is rumored to be a violent and dangerous person. Jem and Scout, eager to see Boo for themselves, concoct a plan to sneak into his yard at night and peek into his window. Scout's father, Atticus, catches them in the act and reprimands them, but also takes the opportunity to teach them about empathy and understanding. He tells them to try and see things from other people's perspectives, and reminds them that Boo Radley may not be as dangerous as he seems. The chapter concludes with Scout reflecting on the events of the day and the importance of understanding and empathy. She notes that her father's lessons have taught her to see the world in a different way, and that she is beginning to understand the complexities of the world around her. Overall, Chapter 1 of To Kill a Mockingbird provides a detailed introduction to the main characters and the town of Maycomb, as well as the themes of empathy and understanding that will be explored throughout the novel. It sets the stage for the rest of the story, providing a glimpse into the complex social structures and prejudices that exist in the town, and hinting at the challenges that Scout and her family will face in the coming chapters. Chapter 2 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee focuses on Scout's first day of school and introduces her teacher, Miss Carolyn. The chapter begins with Scout eagerly anticipating her first day of school, but quickly becomes disillusioned with the experience. When Scout arrives at school, she is scolded by Miss Carolyn for already knowing how to read and write, as Miss Carolyn wants to teach her students her own methods. Scout tries to explain that she learned from her father, but Miss Carolyn doesn't want to hear it. Later in the day, Scout becomes frustrated with the way her teacher treats a poor boy named Walter Cunningham. Miss Carolyn offers Walter a quarter to buy lunch, not realizing that the Cunninghams don't take handouts. Scout tries to explain this to her teacher, but Miss Carolyn becomes upset with her and sends her home with a note to her father. When Scout arrives home, her father, Atticus, listens to her story and reminds her to be patient with her teacher, even if she doesn't understand her methods. He also explains that everyone has different experiences and backgrounds that influence the way they see the world. Overall, Chapter 2 highlights the tension between traditional education methods and the individual experiences and knowledge of students. It introduces the character of Miss Carolyn as a well-meaning but inexperienced teacher who struggles to connect with her students, and contrasts her approach with that of Atticus, who values empathy and understanding. The chapter also touches on issues of poverty and class, as seen in the interactions between Miss Carolyn and Walter Cunningham. Chapters 3-4 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee focus on Scout's relationships with her brother Jem and their friend Dill. The chapters also introduce several new characters and explore themes of innocence, morality, and societal norms. Chapter 3 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee follows Scout as she starts her first day of school. She is excited to finally join her older brother Jem at school, but quickly becomes disillusioned with the experience. Scout is already able to read and write, so when her teacher, Miss Carolyn, starts teaching the alphabet to the students, Scout becomes bored and frustrated. To make matters worse, Miss Carolyn reprimands Scout for being able to read, insisting that her father, Atticus, should stop teaching her at home. Scout's classmates are also a source of frustration. During lunch, Scout is horrified to see Walter Cunningham, a boy from a poor family, pour syrup all over his food. When Scout tries to explain to Walter the proper way to eat molasses, Miss Carolyn scolds her for being a know-it-all. After school, Jem invites Walter Cunningham to their house for lunch. During the meal, Walter is clearly uncomfortable with the Finch's opulent lifestyle and hesitant to accept their hospitality. However, Scout and Jem's father, Atticus, talks to Walter and makes him feel at ease. This scene shows the importance of empathy and understanding towards others, regardless of their socioeconomic status. Overall, Chapter 3 highlights the conflict between Scout's individualistic nature and the rigid expectations of the school system. It also introduces the theme of empathy and the importance of understanding others, even those from different backgrounds. The chapter serves as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that it is important to look beyond superficial differences to connect with others. Chapter 4 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee is centered around Scout's fascination with her reclusive neighbor, Boo Radley. Scout, along with her brother Jem and their friend Dill, have been playing a game in which they try to get Boo Radley to come out of his house. Their attempts to provoke Boo Radley's attention include leaving him notes on his windowsill, trying to peep into his windows, and trying to sneak into his yard to see him up close. However, all of their attempts are in vain, as Boo Radley never appears. Scout's curiosity about Boo Radley is juxtaposed with her growing frustration with her school experience. Miss Carolyn, her teacher, reprimands her for being able to read and write and tells her to stop reading with her father, which leaves Scout feeling even more isolated from her classmates. At the end of the chapter, Scout finds 2 pieces of chewing gum in a tree on the Radley property. Jem insists that Boo Radley left the gum there for them, which scares Scout as she believes that Boo Radley is watching them. Chapter 4 highlights the themes of curiosity, fear, and prejudice. Scout's obsession with Boo Radley reflects her natural curiosity and desire to explore the world around her, but also reveals the fear and prejudice that can arise from the unknown. The chapter also highlights the importance of respecting others' privacy and boundaries, as well as the dangers of making assumptions and jumping to conclusions. Chapter 5 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee centers on Jem, Dill, and Scout's continued fascination with Boo Radley. However, this chapter also introduces the idea of courage, particularly in relation to Mrs. DeBose. Jem and Scout walk past the Radley house and notice a strange occurrence. The shutters on one of the windows have been closed. This event sends the children into a frenzy of speculation about what Boo Radley could possibly be doing. They try to come up with different scenarios of what he could be doing inside his house, only to be interrupted by a cranky old woman named Mrs. DeBose. Mrs. DeBose, who lives down the street, is known for her mean-spiritedness and her morphine addiction. She insults Jem and Scout, calling them dirty little things. And this prompts Jem to take matters into his own hands. He destroys Mrs. DeBose's prized camellia bushes in a fit of anger. And as punishment, he is forced to read to Mrs. DeBose every day for a month. The idea of courage is introduced when Atticus tells Jem that Mrs. DeBose is a courageous woman who is fighting her addiction. Jem is initially skeptical, but as he continues to read to Mrs. DeBose, he begins to see her in a new light. He even starts to admire her for her strength and determination. Chapter 5 highlights the theme of courage and its various forms. Jem shows physical courage by destroying Mrs. DeBose's camellia bushes, but it is Mrs. DeBose who exhibits a different kind of courage. Despite her addiction, she is determined to break free from it and live the rest of her life sober. Additionally, this chapter continues to explore the children's fascination with Boo Radley and the rumors and speculation that surround him. In Chapter 6, Jem, Dill, and Scout continue their fascination with Boo Radley, but their interest in him begins to turn into a dangerous game. They start to act out different scenarios of what they think Boo is like and what his life is like inside his house. However, Atticus warns them to stop bothering Boo and to leave him alone. Despite Atticus' warnings, the children continue to sneak into the Radley yard at night. On one of their excursions, they hear a shotgun blast and see a figure running towards them. Jem's pants get caught on the Radley fence, and he is forced to abandon them and flee. When he returns to retrieve them later that night, he finds that they have been mended and neatly folded over the fence. Jem is both shocked and grateful for the gesture, but Scout worries about the unknown person who has been watching them. She is also surprised by Jem's reaction to the incident. He seems more shaken by the fact that someone has been in their yard and has seen them playing their game than he is about losing his pants. The chapter ends with Jem's newfound understanding of the danger of their game and his realization that Boo Radley may not be the strange, frightening figure they have made him out to be. Scout, however, is still fascinated by the mysterious Boo and continues to hope that she will catch a glimpse of him one day. In Chapter 7, Scout and Jem become more persistent in their attempts to make contact with Boo Radley. Despite the warnings of their father and the community's disapproval, they continue to find items left in the knothole of the Radley oak tree, including 2 figures carved out of soap that resemble Jem and Scout. The following day, Jem and Scout find that Nathan Radley, Boo's brother, has filled the knothole with cement, preventing any further gifts from being left. Jem is upset by this and suggests to Scout that they write a letter thanking whoever is leaving the gifts. On the night of Miss Maudie's house fire, while the entire neighborhood is outside helping to put out the flames, Scout realizes that Boo Radley has placed a blanket around her shoulders. She is initially frightened by this, but Jem later explains that Boo was only trying to keep her warm. As the night wears on, Scout comes to realize that despite the town's fear and prejudice towards him, Boo Radley is not the monster that he has been made out to be. Jem, however, remains skeptical. The fire ultimately destroys Miss Maudie's house, but she takes the opportunity to start anew with a smaller home and a fresh garden. Scout observes that Miss Maudie has a resilient spirit and learns an important lesson about perseverance and resilience in the face of adversity. Chapter 8 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee begins with winter descending on Maycomb County, and the Finch children are excited about the snow that has fallen overnight. Scout and Jem build a snowman in their front yard and adorn it with items from around the house, including one of Atticus's hats and Miss Maudie's hedge clippers. However, Atticus is unhappy with their use of his hat, and Jem tells Scout that they need to ask permission before using other people's belongings. The next day, Miss Maudie's house catches fire, and the town turns out to help put it out. Scout and Jem watch from a safe distance, and when they return home, they find a blanket draped over Scout's shoulders that she doesn't remember putting on. Later, they learn that Boo Radley was the one who put the blanket on Scout, and realize that he must have been watching them from inside his house. Jem becomes obsessed with the idea of getting a glimpse of Boo Radley and hatches a plan to sneak into the Radley yard and peek into a window. They are successful in reaching the house, but as they try to peer into the window, they are startled by a noise and flee the scene, leaving Jem's pants caught on the Radley fence. When Jem returns later to retrieve his pants, he finds them mended and folded over the fence, leading him to believe that Boo Radley must have done it. The children are both scared and fascinated by Boo's actions and become more determined to make contact with him. This chapter serves as a turning point in the novel, as the children's curiosity about Boo Radley takes on a more serious and dangerous tone. It also highlights the town's attitudes towards Boo, who is viewed as a mysterious and potentially dangerous figure. Despite this, the children become more sympathetic towards him and start to question the rumors and prejudices that have been spread about him. Chapter 9 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee begins with Scout's father, Atticus, receiving a case to defend a black man named Tom Robinson. The news of the case and Atticus' decision to defend Tom creates a stir in the town, and Scout overhears people talking about it, including a group of men who confront Atticus outside their house at night. Scout is confused and upset by the reaction of the townspeople and asks her Uncle Jack about it. He explains that Atticus is doing what he believes is right, even if it is not popular, and that she needs to learn to control her temper and not let others provoke her. He also tells her that he will not tolerate bad language from her, even if the other children use it. Scout's cousin Frances comes to visit for Christmas, and she finds him to be a boring and pretentious boy. He taunts her about her father defending Tom Robinson, and Scout loses her temper and attacks him. Uncle Jack punishes her for her behavior, but Scout feels betrayed by his lack of understanding. Later, Atticus explains to Scout that he is defending Tom because he believes in justice and equality, and that he expects her to stand up for what she believes in, even if it goes against the majority. He also reveals that Tom has a crippled left arm, which will be important in the trial. As the chapter ends, Scout realizes that Atticus is not just a good father, but a good man who is willing to stand up for what is right, even if it means going against the prejudices of their society. Throughout the chapter, Scout learns important lessons about the importance of standing up for one's beliefs, controlling one's temper, and the complexities of justice and equality. Atticus emerges as a role model for both Scout and the reader, as he demonstrates his commitment to justice and his belief in the power of individual action to create change. The chapter also introduces the theme of prejudice, as the townspeople react with hostility and suspicion towards Atticus' defense of Tom Robinson. Chapter 10 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee begins with Scout reflecting on her father, Atticus, and how he doesn't behave like other fathers in Maycomb. She muses about his age and how he doesn't do the things other men his age do. Scout notes that Atticus is known to be a skilled marksman and is called one-shot Finch, but he chooses not to hunt. She also mentions that Atticus is older than other fathers in Maycomb, and that he is quieter and more reserved. The chapter then shifts to the introduction of Mrs. DeBose, an elderly, sickly woman who lives near the Finch family. Mrs. DeBose is known for her crotchety behavior and her tendency to say whatever is on her mind, even if it's offensive. She often yells at Jem and Scout as they pass by her house, and the children have learned to ignore her. Atticus explains to Jem and Scout that Mrs. DeBose is struggling with a morphine addiction and is trying to quit before she dies. Atticus wants Jem to spend time reading to her as a way to distract her from her cravings. Jem reluctantly agrees, and he and Scout begin visiting Mrs. DeBose's house after school. Mrs. DeBose is not an easy patient, and she often berates Jem and Scout, making racist and insulting comments. Despite this, Jem persists in reading to her, and Scout often accompanies him, listening to Jem's readings of Ivanhoe. Eventually, Mrs. DeBose becomes so agitated that she begins to convulse, and Jem and Scout flee the house in fear. Atticus later explains to Jem that Mrs. DeBose was a woman of great courage, despite her cantankerous behavior. He explains that she was trying to break her addiction to morphine before she died, and that Jem's reading helped distract her during her final days. Atticus uses Mrs. DeBose's story as an example of true courage and as a lesson to Jem and Scout about the importance of seeing things from other people's perspectives. In Chapter 11, Jem and Scout attend the trial of Tom Robinson, a black man accused of raping a white woman. The courtroom is packed, and the children struggle to find seats. They eventually find seats in the balcony with Reverend Sykes, a black preacher. The trial begins with the testimony of the first witness, Mr. Heck Tate, the sheriff of Maycomb. He testifies that he was called to the scene of the alleged crime and found Mayla Ewell, the alleged victim, beaten and bruised. He also testifies that he saw Tom Robinson's left arm, which was shriveled due to an injury, and that it was unlikely that he could have inflicted the injuries on Mayla. The next witness is Bob Ewell, Mayla's father. He testifies that he saw Tom Robinson raping his daughter, and that he called for help. Atticus questions him about the events of the day and points out inconsistencies in his story. During his testimony, it is revealed that Bob Ewell is left-handed, which may be significant in the case. The trial is adjourned for the day, and Jem is upset by the way the prosecutor, Mr. Gilmer, treated Tom Robinson on the stand. The next day, Atticus questions the sheriff and Bob Ewell further and calls Tom Robinson to the stand. Tom testifies that he did not rape Mayla and that he was only trying to help her by reaching for a box on a shelf when she grabbed him. He also testifies that he was afraid of Bob Ewell, who had threatened him in the past. Despite Tom's compelling testimony, the jury finds him guilty. Jem is devastated by the verdict and struggles to understand how the jury could have ignored the evidence. Atticus explains to him that the verdict was the result of racial prejudice and that they must continue to fight against it. As they leave the courthouse, Reverend Sykes tells Jem and Scout that they can be proud of their father for standing up for what is right. The chapter concludes with the children leaving the courthouse and Atticus walking out last. Reverend Sykes tells Scout to stand up as her father is passing, and she realizes that everyone in the balcony is standing in respect for Atticus. She doesn't understand why they are doing this, but she knows that it's important. As they walk home, Jem tells Scout that he is disappointed by the verdict and can't believe that Tom was found guilty, despite the overwhelming evidence in his favor. Atticus reminds Jem and Scout that they must have faith in the justice system, even if it is flawed, and he tells them that the trial was a step in the right direction towards equality and justice for all. Part 1 of To Kill a Mockingbird serves as an introduction to the town of Maycomb, its inhabitants, and the central conflicts of the novel. The actions in this part of the book involve Scout and Jem's experiences growing up, and their interactions with the town's residents, including their father's decision to defend Tom Robinson in court. Throughout Part 1, we see the children's innocence and naivety being challenged by the prejudice and racism of their community. They encounter a range of characters, from the kind and wise Atticus Finch to the mysterious Boo Radley, and learn valuable lessons about empathy, understanding, and the importance of standing up for what is right. One of the key themes of the novel is the injustice of the criminal justice system and the entrenched racism that pervades society. The trial of Tom Robinson serves as a prime example of this, as his guilt is assumed based on his race, rather than on the evidence presented in court. Overall, Part 1 sets up the major conflicts and themes of the novel, providing a foundation for the rest of the story. The characters we have met so far will continue to grow and develop in the following parts, and we can expect to see their beliefs and values challenged as they confront the harsh realities of their world. And that's it for today's episode of Uncle Al's Bookshelf. I hope you enjoyed this quick summary of another timeless classic, and that you discovered something new about the world of literature. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. What did you think of today's selection? Did we miss anything important? Is there a specific book you'd like us to cover next? Let us know and join the conversation. Also, if you like this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your fellow book lovers. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel to stay up to date with our latest book summaries and literary insights. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Uncle Al's Bookshelf.